Hi everyone, it's Bells. Welcome back to my channel. This is part 2 of the end of the year double feature video set. Clearly I did not film this on the same day, based off of my hair. Today we're going to be doing top 10 most memorable books of 2022. So instead of doing top 10 best, where I go through my list of 5-star books and just kind of like pick out the ones that I think are the best or should be the best, I instead wanted to kind of encapsulate the entire year with the books that I've recommended the most, that I've thought about the most, books that I just like literally won't shut up about. Not all of these are 5-star books. Some of them you may have not heard of because I read them the last couple months while I was taking a little hiatus from YouTube. I wanted these to be books that I've remembered and I talk about, not necessarily books that are like technically the best that I didn't actually engage with as much, even though I liked them a lot. If you want to go and see all of the 4.5 to 5-star books that I read this year, go and check out part 1 of this video. I just tier listed every single book that I rated higher than 4.5 stars, which I think is like 30 plus books, and that was really fun. So go and check that out after this guy. But without further ado, let's bring on the books. And we're gonna start with a couple of honorable mentions before I get into like the real top 10. The first one on that list is Exit West by Mohsin Hamid. This is like a magical realist novel that winds up commenting on how borders are arbitrarily created in our world and what happens to the world and to the concept of communities when those borders no longer matter. This book like brought the concept of what borders actually mean and how they function into the forefront of my mind, and it hasn't really left since I read this guy. I think I read this in a different video. If you want to go and see a longer review, I'll put the link up there and in the description, but that is the first honorable mention. The next one is Senlin Ascends by Josiah Bancroft. This is the first in a quadrilogy, a fantasy quadrilogy. I actually think it's more of a sci-fi. Basically, it's set in this giant tower, the Tower of Babel. Obviously, we've got some religious allegories here. Senlin goes on his honeymoon with his wife and promptly loses her and has to travel through the tower to find her. This book is incredibly memorable to me because Senlin, as a person, is so not a fantasy protagonist. He is so earthy and grounded and anxious. It's one of the most unique fantasies I've read in a long time. I've recommended this pretty widely as well, and I just think it's a good time. And it's not that difficult of a fantasy. I think it's really accessible. That is the second honorable mention. The third one you might be surprised at that's not being in my top 10, but Priory of the Orange Tree by Samantha Shannon is another honorable mention. This is, I mean, one of the best fantasy standalones I've read in a very long time. It's got some lovely LGBTQ rep and is just a big, like, women-centric, massive epic fantasy with dragons and the end of the world and wars and princesses and wizards and sorcerers, and it's just like a good time. But it is weirdly not in my top 10 most memorable, even though I gave it 5 stars. I think it's like a genuinely amazing, perfect book. The last honorable mention is Snow Glass Apples by Neil Gaiman. I haven't stopped thinking about this since I read this. This is a graphic novel retelling of Snow White, where Snow White is a vampire, and it is from the evil queen's perspective. And you know what? This story would have catapulted this to the top of my list anyways, because I love a good fairy tale retelling, but the artwork is just the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. It elevated Neil Gaiman's novel from like a 4 stars to like a billion stars, because it's just so gorgeous and unique and really, really captivates your eye. Like, I really wanted to sit and just like stare at the art for forever. So if you like fairy tales and you like pretty pictures, I think you should pick it up. So top 10 most memorable. This is not really in any particular order. I do have one book that I think was my favorite book of the year, and that will of course be last on the list. I like all of these equally, but for different reasons. So let's just get started. We'll start with, because I have it in front of me, The Price of Salt by Patricia Highsmith. So I actually read this for school, as you can tell by all the tabbies. This was published in 1952. It is a LGBTQ novel. I read this for queer writing, following Therese, who works at a department store, and her affair with an older woman who is Carol. This really blew me away. Patricia Highsmith before this was known for writing suspense novels. She wrote Strange Train, I don't know, something with a train. The way that this is written is incredibly atmospheric. We're inside of Therese's mind the whole time. She clearly has an anxiety disorder. She's very stressful. to read about. But it's a really interesting coming of age story that revolves around Carol as a catalyst for Teresa's blossoming, I guess you could say. Even though it's technically like just a romance, it also has that element of anxiety and propulsion that I think a lot of wonderful suspense thrillers do have, and that's like their whole thing. On another note, this was written in the 50s and is a lesbian story with an ending that's not horribly tragic. And I think it's like one of the first books of its kind that didn't end in a horribly tragic way. Knowing the history behind this kind of a book and all of the other books I've read for this class just made it that much more exceptional. I loved it with every little bit of my body. I wrote an essay on it, which was a mistake. It's the only 5-star book I've read for that class so far. So I highly, highly, highly recommend this one. Oh, let's talk about It Will Just Be Us by Joe Kaplan. This is my favorite horror of the year and probably my new favorite horror at all ever. It Will Just Be Us by Joe Kaplan is a gothic haunted house story, but it really flips all of those haunted house tropes on its head. A grouping of 2 sisters and their mom in their childhood home, which is haunted, and one of the sisters starts seeing a new ghost in this home who is a little faceless boy who enacts more and more cruel things as the story moves forward towards the climax. I don't really want to give you more than that. I can just tell you that it freaked me out. It was incredibly stressful to read in the best way, in a way that only a good horror can like really do for you. And the ending of this book is the most memorable image in my brain. I will literally never forget the ending image of that book. I want to read it again so I can just experience it all over again. Because I think that this is one that you could reread over and over and the suspense would never go away. By the time you figure out what's going on, it's like all of the events are in a like in an avalanche, like the ball is just rolling and there's no stopping it, and it's like watching a train crash. Like, you know where it's going and it's horrible, but you can't look away and you have to finish it like in that moment. So I just think it was such an incredible book. I don't see anybody else talking about it, so please, if you like horror, if you like haunted houses, that is such a phenomenal read. On that theme, let's talk about The Witching Hour by Anne Rice. So I read this. This took me like 2.5 months to read because she is chunky. She is a dense, dense book. This is an epic of epic proportions following the Mayfair witch family. Rowan specifically has been estranged from her family for a long time. She's a very successful surgeon. And after the death of her mother, she returns to New Orleans to meet the family and discover her own witchy powers, along with her new love, Michael. And they have to deal with this dark entity that has been cursing the family for generations. A solid 500 pages of this 1,000-page book is just family history. And it is worth it to read to really experience like the patterns of the family and how everything kind of flows together. I think it's written so beautifully. It's such an absolute masterpiece. And I can't stop thinking about it, and it's so disturbing, and it will make you feel things for horrible things, and you're gonna hate it, and you're gonna want to keep reading it. So I think if you're looking for something long and hefty that is just a wonderful expression of Anne Rice's writing, you can't go wrong with this. I can't stop thinking about this book, and I haven't started the next one yet because I want to be in the right mind space for it, because it's pretty dark. Definitely check the trigger warnings on this one. Like, please, I promise it's very dark, but it's absolutely worth it. On this like horror-y theme, I very recently read All the Murmuring Bones by Angela Slatter, or A.G. Slatter. I can't remember what she goes by on that one. This is marketed as a fairy tale gothic horror where the writer creates her own fairy tale. It includes mermaids and kelpies and ghosts and sirens and curses and magic and witches and all of the things that you could ever want from fairy tale lore are in this book, and it's fabulous. This like starts off very typical gothic. We're in this crumbling old castle following a young girl who's gonna be wed to her very shitty cousin. Is that a spoiler? I don't know. Kind of, but it's fine. It happens pretty early on. And so she runs away to go and find her parents, her estranged parents. And the events unfold. She has to experience and deal with a bunch of fairy tale creatures on her way. And when she gets to where her parents are, there's like a whole other conspiracy to unravel, a whole other gothic house and creepy people and creepy little town and a big weird lake and family mystery and all of the fun things. I recently read this, so it feels kind of silly for me to like put it on most memorable, but I just loved it. I just loved it. It's a fairy tale gothic. Like, literally, what more could you ask for? It's centered around mermaids, and I love mermaids. It's dark and creepy and has all of the perfect elements of the gothics that I love so much. The atmosphere is wonderful. The incorporation of different fairy tale creatures into the story as just like entities that every person knows about and just has to deal with, also incredible. The whole family mystery is great when it starts unraveling. I just thought it was so well done. I actually didn't give this one 5 stars because there's like a couple little points of gender essentialism in this book that were really bizarre to me and really pulled me out of the story. It felt almost like someone else had written that. It was so jarring. That only happened like 2 or 3 times, and as an entire entity, I really just like, I just ate this book up. I did not plan on reading it in a single day, but I did, and it was totally worth it. It was very good. Let's talk about the only nonfiction that I have on this list. Men Who Hate Women by Laura Bates is about Laura Bates's experience delving into the manosphere. So that is like incels and pickup artists, men's rights activists, MGTOW, all those really lovely, great people. Laura Bates took it upon herself to really learn a lot about them. She created a persona to kind of get inside of these communities and read about them, and wrote everything they said and talked about. This is a very short book. It's like under 300 pages, and it took me 2 months to read because it was so stomach turning. It was so upsetting. But I also think it was incredibly eye-opening. I didn't know most of what was in there, and I have a much better understanding of how these communities function and how they grow and flourish than I did before, and now I'm really annoying about it. It doesn't pull any punches, and I think that's really important when writing about content like this. But because it doesn't pull any punches, like, I literally felt sick to my stomach reading it. It's literally the worst things I've ever read. Ever, and knowing that they came from real life people, it makes it a lot worse. It's like, you know how horror stories like start with like based on a true story to make it feel all spooky and like extra scary. Yeah, this is like that, but it's actually a true story, and so it's a lot worse. I highly recommend it. I think it's fantastic. Please be okay on your brain for it. On that note, let's talk about My Dark Vanessa by Kate Elizabeth Russell. I think this book is one of the most beautiful books I've ever read, prose-wise. I also think it dealt with the entire issue of grooming in a very complicated way and actually takes it and explores its complexity. So it is about grooming. It's about a 15-year-old girl who's groomed by her teacher, and they start having a relationship. I read this on a plane in one go in like 4 hours, and then I had a panic attack and fainted on a plane by myself. So, I really don't recommend you do that, please. It's heavy and sad and depressing, and will make you feel horrible. So, like, don't do that. That is part of why it's on this list, is because, like, I'll never forget that experience. But I do think that this book is absolutely the most well-written, fictionalized version of this story that I've read in a long time. I think a lot of people do biographies and autobiographies of this issue really well, but I find fiction ones can often romanticize it, or on the flip side, like really only show it as being horrible and not show the complexity of like what that relationship actually does to a 15-year-old mind and how that informs the rest of their life as an adult. And this book really went into it, and I really respect it for that, and it's written really beautifully. If it wasn't written so beautifully, I wouldn't have been able to finish it. So I definitely recommend it if you're wanting to experience that, I guess. Let's talk about something fun. A Psalm for the Wild, built by Becky Chambers. I know everyone in the universe is talking about this book, and they should, because it's amazing. I have recommended this book to multiple people. I've given this book as a Christmas present. This book is so fucking cute. I forced my partner to read it, and now it's their favorite book. In a future where robots were basically running everything, and then they grew consciousness and were like, we don't really want to work for you humans anymore, bye-bye, we're gonna go away to the wilderness, and just like disappeared. This story takes place like long enough after that that the robots seem to be like a myth, and we're following a tea monk who decides to go into the wilderness to find the noise of crickets, and they run into a little robot and have a very cute, philosophical, happy little adventure together. It's like 150 pages. I think I read it in just over an hour. It's so cute. It's so wonderful. It's so well written. I can't wait to read the second one. I have it coming in from the library very soon. This book made me feel things I never expected to feel about robots. I don't like robots, but I love robots. I love this robot. You know? Ah, my God. The next one we'll talk about is also a novella, Comfort Me with Apples by Catherine M. Valente. It's a very weird little horror thriller. I don't even know really how to describe it without giving it away, but basically there's a girl in this very weird culty town who has a husband who starts doing some really shady things, and she kind of has to get to the bottom of it. Let me tell you, this book blew my frickin' mind. It's certainly weird. I don't think it's for everyone, but the people that it is for are going to love it. I can't even tell you who it is because it gives it away, but I promise, you'll know. At the end, I just think it's worth it. It's such a sharp book. The prose is so unique and descriptive. You can feel all of the things happening. I believe a window breaks at one point and it's I could hear the glass breaking. It's that kind of language and description that I just think is absolutely gorgeous. And the book is phenomenal. Comfort Me with Apples. Highly recommend. So this one is kind of a cop-out because it's technically 3 books, but obviously The Assassin's Apprentice Farseer Trilogy is my most memorable series that I read this year as an entity. Also, I got such a pretty one for Christmas. Assassin's Apprentice, Royal Assassin, and Assassin's Quest. The Farseer Trilogy is following Fitz, the bastard son of a prince, and he's basically dropped off there at 6 years old and is raised by the stable keeper. I don't remember. Burrick. It's Burrick. I love him. Burrick's great. And he discovers that he has this kind of mind magic. It's a political coming of age fantasy. These books are my favorite for a couple of reasons. I, first of all, really, really enjoy Robin Hobb's writing. Her character-focused fantasies are just amazing to me. I love how she writes characters. She writes them so real. Fitz feels so real that once he grows up and is a teenager and he starts making really stupid decisions, he feels so real I could call him on the phone and yell at him. He feels that real, and I just love that aspect of it. I also love how the fantasy is kind of just woven into the story. It doesn't feel like an Eye of the World or a Lord of the Rings where we have to spend so much time world building and so much time establishing the story and the characters, because it's not really about that. It's about Fitz. And as Fitz discovers the world, so do we. And I really enjoy that part of it as well. The story is good. The writing is good. I cried at the end. I think I cried in every book, actually. I don't know. I love them. I think they're the best fantasy books I've read in a really, really long time, probably ever. I'm currently in the middle of the second trilogy, which I'm not liking as much, but it's still pretty good. The characters are still bringing me through it, and I absolutely can't wait to see how everything comes together in the last trilogy of this series. But the Farseer Trilogy, if you haven't read them yet, I highly recommend them. I would check the triggers on it. There's some animal stuff in here that's really hard to read. It is worth it. I don't like reading that stuff at all, but it's so essential to the story that I do think it's worth it. But it's just something to keep in mind if that is something you are sensitive about, like I am. I wish I had known that walking into it, but you know what? If I had, I might not have read them, so do it that way you will, I guess. The main event, the book you're all here to see, I assume, my favorite book of the year, Disorientation by Elaine Say Chu. This is so good. This is so good. I started reading it as a library book on my Kobo, and within a chapter, I actually stopped reading it, ordered the book on Amazon so I could get it and tab it and write notes in it. I have literally never done that with a fictional book I am reading for fun. I have never done that. This book is sharp. It is funny. It is crazy and chaotic. The plot is ridiculous, but in the best way. Every single word in this book matters. What is this about? This is about a PhD student. What is her name? Ingrid Yang is a PhD student. She's not really enjoying her dissertation. She's in her last year. She has to finish it or she will fail out of the program. And while she's looking through the archives, she comes across this very bizarre note that takes her on a absolutely wild goose chase that winds up having her reflect on her relationship to the white institution of a university that she goes to, her white boyfriend, and how he impacts her life, and how that overwhelming whiteness like informs her own life. This book is amazing. I feel like I've talked about it so much, and I don't even think I've talked about it on this channel very much. It's just like in my normal life I talk about this book a lot because I think it's fantastic. I don't really know what else to say about it. I highly recommend it to anyone, like truly anyone. This is a book that I would say anybody could read and probably enjoy. At least anyone who watches my channel. I think it's really thought-provoking. I think it's a book you should read with a pencil because you're going to have thoughts while you read it, and you should write them down because they're interesting. I think the ending is great. It's exactly what you would not expect it to happen at the end, and it's fantastic. The mystery is insane in the best way. I just think this book is an absolute masterpiece. The way it's written is phenomenal. Like, it truly made me laugh out loud and gasp. I was like punching the air when we're talking to her shitty boyfriend. God, I hate Stephen. Stephen fucking sucks. It's so good. It's so good. Please read it. Please. Oh my God. If you read anything, read Disorientation. I don't see a single person talking about this book. Please. Here you go. There you go. I hope you enjoyed my top 10 most memorable books of 2022. Go and watch part 1 if you haven't already, where I tier list all of my 4.5 through 5-star books of 2022. Let me know what some of your most memorable books were from this year, or your best books, or your favorite book, or whatever. I love to hear that kind of stuff from you guys. Yeah, that's it. So have a great day. Happy reading. I'll see you all in my next video. Bye.